There we go. Hey everyone, I am Eric. Here's some live coding. I'm an Angular developer. I have been for 6 or 7 years now. And today I've got another function to move over to one of my open source libraries called Microdash. So earlier today I was working on this Sudoku app. And in the process there were a couple of functions that I wish I had from Lodash. But I don't actually use Lodash. I use a library of my own called Microdash, which has all the same functions with all the same function signatures and the same everything, except there's a few design decisions, some features that I forego in my library that I think are sort of more not the normal use case, and I'm able to make the resulting bundle size much, much smaller. I think it's often about a tenth the size of the Lodash equivalent. And so the function for today, here's the code. In my last session, sample size was moved over, and the other one that I want is shuffle. So this is a function in, let's see, Lodash shuffle. We're going to want this. This is a function in Lodash. You pass it a collection, which could be an array or an object, and it creates an array of shuffled values from that collection. Using a version of Fisher-Yates Shuffle. Well, I'll have to look to see if I can include that in my documentation. But anyway, excuse me. So I suppose let's get to it. So we have. Oh, first, let me just explain. If I already have it here, what am I doing? Well, as I'm writing an app, which I do a lot of, little side projects now and then. If I encounter something that I want to have for my app that could be generic, could be in a library, I'll write it off. Instead of being in my normal app code, I'll write it off in this other to replace directory. And the idea is I'm going to replace this once I have the chance or motivation to move that thing off into one of my open source libraries, of which I have several. Microdash is one of them. And so here I have a very simple version that was good enough for what I needed for this particular app. Now I'm going to move it into Microdash, write up the full test suite, make sure all the edge cases are covered, make sure the typing is locked down, and then be able to use it from then on in this app or any other. Just import it from my library. I have done that. Here's Microdash. I have done that for this many functions from Lodash so far, and I have just found it really. I use it a lot. I use it a lot. Use it all the time. We use it at work too. My team. So, did I say yet why I care about the bundle size? So if you're doing a web app and you might have some users on some low-end mobile devices, bundle size actually becomes important. That's if they're on a slow network, they have to download everything in your bundle, and then if they have a low-end phone, it has to evaluate the full bundle before the page becomes responsive. So let's get it copied over. So we want shuffle now. So we did sample size in the last session. Now we're doing shuffle. And that is going to go in the collection section. I followed the same categorization as Lodash. I do a lot of things just copy what Lodash did, since that's part of like the whole philosophy of the library. So we want to go in Microdash to the collection section and make a copy of that function. And let's go ahead and grab the docs from Lodash. Creates an array of shuffled values using a version of, and let's just see what that Fisher-Yates shuffle is. I've read this in the past, and so I feel like I might have intuitively done it, but let's take a little read and see. Algorithm for generating, yep. Puts all the elements into a hat, continually determines the next element by randomly drawing an element from the hat until no elements remain. Yep, that's exactly what I did. It produces an unbiased permutation. Every permutation is equally likely. So that's an interesting, an alternative to this would be to loop through an array from index 0 to the end, and each time pick a random element from which to swap into that position. Then in the end it's shuffled, but it turns out, and if you read this page you'll see the explanation, it turns out that makes a non-uniform distribution of where things end up relative to where they started. But the way I have implemented it is like that. I will show you. It's actually in this sample size where the real work is done. So we make basically a copy, an array of what you pass in. And so this is like the hat in the lingo of that Wikipedia page. And we loop through the number of things that you need in your result, each time pulling out of the hat, so it's no longer in the array, a value at random. And so as you're building up well, what in our case is going to be the shuffled version of that full array, you're sort of copying from the a clone of the original array, picking one out and making it smaller from random positions at a time. But that should, I believe, already be working, and we just need to copy in all the extra like tests and typing verifications and stuff to make it like production grade, put it in the library, let anyone in the world use it confidently. So in my documentation I always include a little section here for comparing the size. If you import from Lodash, how much bigger is it going to make your app, your bundle, versus from Microdash? Okay, so we've got the documentation. We can go ahead and put that same link like the Lodash documentation did of the of the Fisher-Yates shuffle. I'll get it one of these times. Square brackets, please. There we go. Cool. So for the test suite, I make a copy. Essentially, I have the same test suite as Lodash, minus the features that I have by design chosen not to include in my library. So let's go pull up Lodash's, let's see, oops, not the documentation, I was already there. Lodash's tests, and I'm going to end up wanting both of those. And let's find the tests for shuffle. And oh, that's a very small test suite. This might go quickly. So we want a new file for shuffle spec. And it's going to have these tests in it. Now, just like the last session, we don't use the same testing framework here in Microdash as Lodash uses. We're using Jasmine. Even though Microdash has 0 dependencies, I am an Angular developer. I use this in support of my Angular apps. You can use it for any kind of app, but for me, I develop inside a monorepo for the libraries. And so while Microdash has no dependencies, something like ngCore, which has a bunch of helper utility things specifically for Angular development, and so this monorepo, my build chain is all just with the Angular CLI, and that comes with Jasmine as its test suite runner or test runner. So I'm not sure which thing uses this assert.notStrictEqual, but it's a bit different for Jasmine. And then also, I use sort of the Angular community split into multiple declarations. The Angular community style guidelines and linting and that sort of thing. So I do a little bit of tweaking to sort of get it up to those standards. And let's switch that to constant. Oops, fix file, please. There we go. And I like to use, well, and even the linter is telling me to use an arrow function instead of the old style. Well, it's not that it's the old style, it's the original style function. It still has uses today. And then we will need to import shuffle. And let's see. We already have the test server running. So let me just do one test at a time. And we'll get to that in a minute, I guess. So we want the shuffle to have all the same elements as the original array. So that would be something like expect shuffling the array to contain, to equal jasmine dot array with exact contents of the original array. I would not normally remember that off the top of my head, but I used that recently in I think this weekend. So if we save that and let our test suite run, hopefully we now have a functioning shuffle. Sure enough, 667, all green. Fantastic. I'm going to actually restart the test server because I don't remember where I left off and what might have had problems. If there's this problem that I am very annoyed with in Karma right now, where if you have two files, you make changes to two different files, but one of them has an error. So while there's an error in one, you also modify another. You come back, by the time you fix the error, Karma is watching your files and recompiling on each change. It's only going to pick up the changes from the file that had the error that you fixed. And the other file that has changes, some bug does not get updated, and you end up with basically a corrupt compilation of your project. So anyway, let's get back to our test suite and make sure that we get this all connected and running again every time the files change. And there's the full test suite for the Microdash library, all green, and we can continue. This feels like a very similar test to the one before, except this time we're actually using the object. And now we're going to have to modify our production code to deal with objects, or at least the typing. Probably just the typing, because sample size deals with arrays or objects already. That was the previous session, making that all work. So we want to expect the sorted version to equal, and that ends up being in effect the same test as this one, but whatever. I wouldn't write my test like that, but in this in this particular library, my whole philosophy is to just mirror Lodash in all the ways that still make sense given my reduced bundle size philosophy. So I'll keep the tests like that too. So we need this to be able to take in an object, and I happen to remember doing a lot of typing like this recently over here in sample size. So I'm going to copy that and tweak it. Yeah. We don't have the second argument. And the or nil is interesting. Should treat number values for collection as empty. Number values for collection as empty? That's a weird test. They don't have any special tests in here for passing in a null collection or a null, yeah, collection. And we are going to have to make a change there. So I am going to leave myself a note. Check on whether this needs to, should handle nil collections. I suspect that even though there's not a test for it, if I go actually run the Lodash function and pass it null or undefined for the collection, that it's going to treat that as the empty array, basically. And that's a feature that I would like to maintain in this library. I do find that one useful. So where are we? Okay, we've got a test. Let's run the test. Just save the file and it should start running. And I believe we're going to get an error because collection.length is going to be undefined. Yeah. And so we need to modify our code here to handle collection being either an array or an object. And how do we pick the length if it's an object? We could grab all the keys of the object and see how long that array is. Ooh, we have a size. I think we have something that already does that for us. I think we have a size function that we can import from here that takes an object or an array, or even a string, and gives us back exactly what I was saying. Take the keys of it and grab the length. Okay, perfect. So let's save that, and that should hopefully satisfy our test. Sure enough, from red to green. Fantastic. All right, let's continue with this, and then I'll come back and hit this to do later. It should shuffle small collections. Okay, I'm not quite sure why that's a special case, but no problem. We can verify that in our library as well. So it is going to 1,000 times build up an array of 1,000 executions of shuffle of these two elements. Use some fancy function to dedupe them into what turns out to be getting the array in either order. Okay, cool. I'm down with that. Let's rewrite this in some more modern syntax. So let's see. This one was actually pretty good. Let's just import times from Lodash. I said this in the last session, but I'll say it again. In these tests, I could import times from microdash as well for the same result, but it just feels nicer to keep, I know that, well, sort of here, like they use Lodash stable. They use like the previously compiled version of Lodash to run the functions that they want that aren't the ones that are actually under test. And that helps ensure that if you make an error like in this times function, the only ones that are going to fail are the times tests, and you're not going to ruin your whole test suite and try and figure out what went wrong. It keeps it more isolated. And so for me, rather than running against the previous version of microdash, I just run against Lodash. We can remove the braces around this guy to use a little more modern syntax there. And then the new syntax here is expect this thing to equal that. And again, we'll just import from Lodash itself. And let's see if that passes. 1,000 iterations. That sure seems like overkill to me, but I guess it's fast enough. Great. And finally, I should treat number values as empty. Okay, I'm not going to do this test. One of the design decisions I make in microdash that allows me to keep things smaller and just sort of simpler is relying on TypeScript to take care of those kinds of problems for me. So instead of having my code handle any arbitrary value anyone could ever think to pass in for any of the arguments, that's what TypeScript is for. It helps people avoid those errors. What in microdash is then an error. So I don't care about this test. Great. So we have a passing test suite. This seems like a very light test suite. It doesn't. I wonder if they have some other tests elsewhere. The reason I opened up this file earlier, this is the old test suite for a previous version of Lodash. And I find it useful to look at that from time to time because while all the shuffle tests all the tests in this file are for shuffle, it is possible that there are shuffle tests in other files like, oh gosh, like this array categories. This has a bunch of tests for all the functions in Lodash that work on arrays or return arrays or something like that. So rather than searching through this like directory to try and find any things like that, we can go to the old test suite of Lodash that has everything in one file and do a quick search for shuffle. Well, that was already what I searched for something before. Okay, so in this section, I happen to know how Lodash was structured from experience. So in this section, these are the tests that we copied over. So it should contain the same elements after a collection is shuffled. That's what we have here. And so that's going to be this whole section. And then there's some stuff down here. I see some matches down here. Ah, yeah, return arrays. So there's a bunch of extra like array category tests that are also run against this method. And so this gets tricky. I'm not a fan of the way this test suite is written. If I want to find all the things that shuffle needs to adhere to, I got to do all this crazy seeing how it loops through all these different arrays to decipher that. I'm being distracted right now because I see two matches for shuffle down here. Ah, okay. Yeah, this one we can skip. Methods that return new wrapped values. That's a feature of Lodash that I don't have in microdash. So this is the only one left. So now I have to see where this return arrays is used. I must have spelled, oh, there, return arrays. So this is accepts falsy, and I don't think we didn't see that in accepts falsy. So we're looping through accepts falsy and only doing this line if it returned arrays, but we didn't see shuffle in returns accepts falsy, so that doesn't apply to us. But here we go. It should return an array. Oh, now wait a minute. That's what we have here. Maybe they have pulled some of these out into the individual tests now. That would be great. Let's look carefully at this and see if that matches the test we already wrote. So one of the iterations through this loop of the test is going to be for shuffle. And it's going to use the default, so it's just going to call shuffle with no arguments, which obviously it doesn't take any other arguments except the collection itself. And then it is asserting that it is an array. Yeah. And then that a strict equality match with the array you passed in is false. So only if this is the pull method should you expect it to be true. This is not pull, this is shuffle, and so therefore that should be false. And we do not have that in our test yet. So but it's under this here. Let's just add it to this test. Replace this with actual, and we're going to expect actual not to be array. So it has the same contents, but it is not the actual same array. And that should finish our test coverage. Sure enough, everything still passes. Fantastic. Great. So that's moving along quickly. We have a to-do here. It's not covered in their test suite whether it handles nil. But I am going to guess that if we go actually try, which we can do here on their documentation page, if we try shuffling undefined, we do get an array back. Or if we try shuffling null, we get an empty array back. So let's make our own test for this. And let's see. It's going to go in a different section. I like to leave a comment like this for all the tests I shamelessly steal from the from the Lodash codebase, which I forgot to put on this last time. And we're going to add our own test here for it accepts nil values for the collection, or even better yet, that it returns the empty array. Does the test really about what it returns, or just that it accepts it? I guess both, honestly. Returning an empty array. Oops. So, excuse me. We're going to expect shuffle of null to equal an empty array, and similar with undefined. I think that should already work. I just need the test coverage for it. Hey, there we go. Cool. So that covers our to-do. What's left? We need to calculate the size of this thing so we can compare it to Lodash and see how much improvement we actually get using our library. And should also probably get some typing tests in place. For these libraries I create with these helper functions, I want to make sure that not only does the behavior work well, but all the return type, like this array, t, key of t, that kind of stuff, is rock solid as well. And so let's go ahead and do the typing next. And because I know just in the last session I did I did this sample function, and we did typing for that, and it's going to be very similar. So that I use a library or a tool called DTSlint to do expectations on types. This is in collection. We're going to want something similar to this. Oh, no, not sample size. Oh, yeah, sample size. That's the one that I did in the last session. Shuffle, I will show you how this works. Any place we see sample size, we're probably going to want it to instead stay shuffle. Oh, right, we're going to have to export this thing to have access to it. Let's go back. To get this into the public API of our library, we have to export it. And so we're adding this right below sample size. But now it's shuffle. Perfect. So now that should be available here. We can import it. And there are no variations where we pass a second argument. Oh, so that's, well, let's see. Let's just remove the argument from those. So what's happening here? DTSlint, you put a comment in your code with this special $expect type. And then DTSlint is going to analyze your code, the next line down, and see what the result of that expression is. And so, kind of like you get for your tooltips, if you hover over that, you see this is a number array. And so it's going to basically assert that it matches whatever you put here. So if I were to change this to a string array, and then let's go ahead and get this running. DTSlint for microdash. Excuse me. We should get an error here. And so this is a way to write tests for the typing itself. And sure enough, there's our error. If we rerun that, they're all going to pass. Let me just talk through a little bit of what I did in the last session so that you can see how it's working in this session. Kiwi Gamer Romania, hello. Thank you for joining. Are you a Angular developer like me, or anyway, whatever your reasons, nice to have you. Yes, talking through how this works. So, why we have all these expectations. So, let me just break a few things to bring you back through why we needed to end up with what we have. Before, if we didn't have that or nil there, nil is a special type I have for null or undefined. And if we didn't have that there, these objects that these arguments that could be null or undefined, it gets the typing off. It says it's an array of never. And so that's because t, well, here, let me hover over it. So t here, if you look at this, the angle brackets here between shuffle, that matches the t. So this tooltip is showing us that it's treating the value of that generic t as our object or null. And so then when we get here and we try to index that value of the object or null, that becomes never. So our trick to fix that is to say, okay, when TypeScript is trying to infer that value of t for the generic, the or null or undefined sort of gets captured here, and t is now just, you can see now t doesn't have that or null anymore. So it inferred here that the value without that undefined or null, and we can get the actual proper values out of it. Um, Happy to have a beginner programmer here with me, Kiwi Gamer Romania. Um, and are you in New Zealand? Because that seems like it'd probably be pretty late there, or early at this point. Maybe it's morning. Um, Romania. Okay, so the Kiwi is for okay, yeah, almost 2 a.m. Huh. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. I'm over in the U.S. I'm in Michigan, and it's 7 p.m. here. Um, Great. So anyway, I think that covers our typing, and we can move on to the last step. I think should be the last step, which is getting these sizes. And this is sort of the real satisfying part of the whole process, where you get to see how much more compact it is than the Lodash version. So for that, I am going to want to go to a terminal and build the package in production mode. So it uses the full optimization. It minimizes the bundle size and everything like that. And then I have this cool, I think it's cool, little tool I developed, which will, which needs to be restarted so it knows that there's such a thing as shuffle, I guess. Um, this is going to, oh, I know why it doesn't know there's such a thing as shuffle. I have to do some work still to get this microdash sizes ready. Yeah, and this will help explain how the whole thing works. So we're in a collection. We're doing something like sample size, but instead this one is actually shuffle. So for each function that I want to compute the size of, I make two files, one for Lodash, one for microdash. And this is going to be used, this tool down here is going to use that file as an app, basically. And it's going to use the Angular CLI to build this very small app that only has these lines of code plus this import in it. And it's going to see how big it is. And then it's going to use a tool called Source Map Explorer to find out how much of that resulting bundle is actually from Lodash. So let's switch from sample size to shuffle, which does not take an extra argument. So we don't need that guy. So I want to exercise it for both the array and the object case. Let's also do an undefined case. And so now I'm sort of exercising all the code paths inside shuffle to make sure that the optimizer doesn't somehow magically detect that there's some code path unused and exclude it from the resulting bundle. I want my size to be the full functionality of shuffle. And I'm logging it out so that it doesn't think, oh, well, you didn't do anything with this, so you don't need it at all, and just not even include it. And then I'm going to make a copy of this for microdash. And just change, the only change is that I'm going to import from microdash. And so these are identical programs except you import from a different place. And now if we run shuffle, do I have to restart or will that work? Ah, here we go. So now it's building the Lodash version, and it's going to see that there's 3.8K added to your bundle that's coming just from that import. And in microdash, it's 842 bytes, which is clearly much smaller. What is that, about a fifth the size? Or not quite that good, but and then the tool added that to us in the documentation. So in the end, when you're using this in your editor, you'll just have this documentation there, and then my little trademark is to tell you how much cooler it is than Lodash. As long as you don't need all the fancy features that Lodash has that microdash does not, like it's a trade-off, right? Romania Kiwi Gamer says, in this period I'm focusing on math since I want to start data science, electric engineering, and physics. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I mean, programming is used for all of those. So it's great for you to be interested in learning about all these coding techniques. Um, if you're an electrical engineer, you're not going to be building full like big programs. Usually, it's like more like scripts. Usually, in terms of the electrical engineers I know, and so you don't have all the same requirements of like software architecture to have a full command of architecture, but certainly programming, writing code. Anyone in any kind of scientific field these days is going to be writing code. Um, Great. Is there anything left? Let's look at our diff and see if there's anything more that we even need to do. Maybe we finished. It went a lot faster because we just did one very similar in the previous session for sample size. All right, so anytime you are writing code, hopefully you're using a version control system, probably Git, and you wanna work in small chunks that are easy to review and understand the full extent of all the changes you made, that are in a nice logical, complete chunk. And then before you commit that for others to use or view, take a look through it yourself. Give yourself a little review of your own code. If you're on a team, working on a software development team, you're going to make a pull request, and someone else is also going to look through all of your changes in the teams I've worked on before you get the okay to merge it into the main branch. I'm just working on this project on my own, so I don't have that whole process. So I just do my own little review here. And be surprised. I surprise myself how often I find something that I forgot or that I still need to look into during this process. So this gets it in the public API. Oh yeah, that's the comment I forgot to include in the last session. Here's our full test. Nothing outstanding, nothing still commented out, no to-dos. It's real short. Okay, here's our implementation, which was very simple since we already had sample size built. All of our typing we covered. We covered the null and undefined. We covered the array and object cases. I can't think of any other cases it needs to cover. And that's it. Gosh. Yep, that went nice and smooth. So let's go ahead and commit that, and then that's going to kick off a continuous integration run. So here we have a GitHub action running that's now going to run the full test suite of all of my libraries that are in this repo. So this is what's called a mono repo. It has multiple open source libraries that I maintain, all in one Git repository. And so Microdash is actually many of these depend on others. So like JS Core, Microdash has no dependencies. It's a standalone library. JS Core then doesn't have any dependencies except Microdash. So it's going to run the full test suite of JS Core and make sure I didn't break anything that way. And I have lots of test coverage because actually all of these import from Microdash. It's sort of my base level library. Oops, not that one, that one. And so here we have two sort of jobs running, one that's running all the tests and the other that's linting everything, checking for, doing static code analysis, checking for, well, it runs DTS lint that we worked on, and also like a couple of other things for just checking code style. And in the end, if that turns green, then this badge on the sort of front page of the whole monorepo stays green. And if it turns red, that gives me lots of chances to notice that and see that there was a problem I didn't anticipate before I actually publish the new version to npm and push it out for everyone in the world to use. Which, I mean, it's not a wildly popular library, but still, maybe we'll get a couple more users from this video. Let's see here. Oh, thank you for the follow, Kiwi Gamer Romania. That's great. I'm glad you're finding this interesting and useful. Do you know where I could find good math videos other than YouTube? No, sorry. Not sure about math stuff. And I'm honestly new even to the whole live streaming thing. This is my first day on Twitch. And I was doing some on YouTube before this, but only in the last like week or so. Heard about MIT OpenCourseWare. Yeah, you know, there's lots of high caliber universities that put things out just on video. Yeah, I've heard of things like that from MIT. I don't know about math in particular, but I wouldn't be surprised. I've done a Coursera course for machine learning, deep neural networks, and so, but there's a fee involved with that. But I'm sure they have math things in Khan Academy and all those. Our linting passed, just waiting for tests. And then, is there anything left to do? I don't want to actually publish to npm yet because I'm still in the middle of adding some more features to some of these other, like ngdev. And I don't have any need to actually import them into another project at this moment. So I will continue to build up new features. Cool. I guess that's probably going to do it for this streaming session then. It's only 7 o'clock, so I'll probably just take a break and come up with something else to do again for the rest of the evening. But I'll call this a stopping point for now and cut the video and go, get a drink of water and that sort of thing. Thanks for sticking around. Anyone here live and anyone watching on YouTube later. I hope you find this helpful. I am giving this a try. If you do like it, leave some comments. Looks like I want to become famous. Oh, someone's spamming my chat now. But on YouTube, leave a comment about anything that you found helpful or that you didn't find so helpful. You know, if it would be better for you if I didn't explain so much and I could move faster and get more actual code out, or to stop and explain more of my processes or whatever. And we are green. Everything looks good. Let's end on a high note. I will see you all next time.